confirm that we are live streaming, but just want to double check real quick and make sure that we're public. Edit, privacy, public for anyone to watch. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We were going over some technical things here, but I'm super excited to be on for part 2 of this week's live author showcase. I'm here live today with one of my favorite authors and friends, Jami Christine, two-time author. But before I jump the gun, I will let her introduce herself. Go ahead, Jami. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Yes, so I am a two-time author, which is super exciting for me. I published my first book, The Transcendent, which I have right here, actually.
I love that cover.
Thank you. I published that last year. It was kind of a lifelong dream, or lifelong as of, I think, 4th grade was when I first had the dream of becoming a published author and writing a novel someday. And I finally realized that dream in 2020. So last year, November 11th, actually, I published my first fiction novel. And yeah, published my first nonfiction under your coaching, which was awesome. Also on November 11th of this year. Yay.
I am so excited about that, gosh. And I've been reading The Transcendent, and it's just such a really heartfelt story. I can really see the care and compassion that you give to all of the characters. I mean, for anyone who's watching who hasn't read it yet, highly recommended. You know, it's not very often that I find a book from a self-published author with a dream in their hearts that comes through, puts in the work, does it, and just does it so well, almost like out of nowhere. And I'm just loving the characters. I'm loving it. So Jami, tell us a little bit more about what you do professionally. I understand that you are a coach in a few different modalities. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I am a massage therapist. I've been doing that for about 12 years. I own a wellness center here in Southern Illinois, and that's been a very successful experience. So obviously I'm very passionate about health and wellness, especially in a holistic way. I also consider myself a spiritual life coach, but I kind of basically incorporate that in with my massage therapy practice. It's kind of like a two for whenever you come see me. It's both massage therapy as well as mental health therapy as well. I've found through my practice that the physical body is basically a manifestation of your emotional health. So addressing your emotional health and your mental health will have a direct effect on your physical health. So I'm all about that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And for anyone who sees me looking to the side, I've got my other device here so I can keep an eye on the chat. And I see that we have Ted Smith live here. It says, hi, Jami. Hi, Andrae. Thank you for being here. So if you guys have questions as you're watching live or on the replay, you know, just drop them in the chat below. And of course, we'll be happy to converse with you. So Jami, let's talk about your new book. Tell me, when did you first get the idea for this book? What was your inspiration?
It was actually kind of a fun divine intervention. No, divine intervention is like, it just kind of runs my life, I feel like. I was actually inspired by my coach, Sammy Sadacario, to create a workshop about how I wrote The Transcendent. So she and I met when she actually posted a question on a writer's group if anyone has written a story based on their personal trauma. And I was like, I did that. And she wanted to know more. So that's how we got to know each other. And I explained to her that I basically had the rug pulled out from under me back in 2011. And that experience and the healing journey that I went on after that got a lot of the inspirational gears turning in my head, combined with my grandma's death, my second son's home birth, and all the work I did around all of that led to ideas based on metaphors that I came up with to create this work of fiction, The Transcendent. So I told her my story and she's like, that's amazing. Would you be interested in teaching a workshop? And I'm like, I've never taught a workshop before, but that would be cool. So she and I got to talking and I just basically started drumming up some ideas, and I happened to post that on Instagram one day, and that's when you reached out and said, hey, have you ever thought about turning your workshop idea into a book? And I thought that would be pretty cool, and the rest is history.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, I mean, I've known Jami a little while. And so I wasn't just like, oh, random person want to come write a book. But Jami is a person that, again, when I think about writing a workshop and getting this done, it's just the timing is so right. So Jami, thinking about this workshop, you know, let me back up. Let me back up. Thinking about this workshop, have you ever taken a workshop for yourself to learn how to write your book?
I did not actually. I was totally winging it. I've loved reading for as long as I knew how to read. I come from a family of avid readers, and I always loved writing too. Like, I actually wrote some little short stories, like a series of short stories when I was in junior high, and I sold them for like 50 cents a copy to the kids in my class. So writing has just always been in my blood. But I've taken workshops before for like meditation and different things like that. But yeah, I've never taken a writing workshop.
See, and that's the beautiful part, is that you can come up with a powerful book, something that's inspiring and just, again, so well written, even without having gone through years and years and years of training to become a writer. This is something that I just wanted to touch on for a second because it comes up so often. I think a lot of people get scared from not having that. Were you nervous about writing your book?
At first, when it was more just for me, for my personal enjoyment, not so much. But when I really got deeper into it and I realized, like, man, I'm really investing a lot of hours in my life into this project, and I started thinking about publishing it and going beyond this, that's when some fears started setting in. I will say I got a little imposter syndrome, because you do start thinking about the fact that, like, I've never had formal training. I've never, like you said, been to a workshop or been in a workshop. I mean, I've just got my basic English class from school under my belt, and a long history of a writing passion to drive me. So, of course, it started crossing my mind, like, who am I to write this novel compared to all these people who, have gone to extensive trainings and have, dedicated a lot more to their life to this craft than I have.
And I think that comes up so often. So what kind of challenges did you face when you were just starting out with your book? What's one thing that you may not have expected to come up as a challenge?
Oh my gosh, plot holes. I'm actually running into that right now as I'm developing the sequel to the Transcendent. Plot holes, and just making sure you fill in all the little nooks and crannies that so people, can not reference back and be like, wait a minute, but you said this back in chapter 2, and that doesn't match up with what you're saying in chapter 8, and making sure everything flows. That's more challenging than I realized.
Oh yeah, and I think, again, a lot of authors struggle with that, and I love how you handled it in your book, Transcend Your Story. You mentioned, going back and looking at like continuity things, like where you had them maybe in school and what classes they were in, and did they change classes at each semester? Because your characters are all students in this book, well, most of them. And I think that's something that is so easy to overlook. Sixth period is art, and one day, next day it's like it's PE. Wait, no, you can't do that. And
I had
love that you
binder, like a 3-inch binder stuffed with notes and things that never even came up in the book, but I knew like 6 or 7 different students' class schedules and where they were at every hour of the day, so I knew if they were going to cross paths or not. And oh my gosh, I had calendars written out of when homecoming was and when prom was, and all these extensive notes that I knew, like, when the weekends fell. So when she had to go homecoming dress shopping, I knew that the continuity was there, that she finished a 5-day week of school and now it's the weekend. And I
mean, that's awesome. And so thinking about your 2 books now, how would you say it feels, or what's the difference in your mind between writing a novel versus a nonfiction book like Transcend Your Story?
Oh my gosh, for me, writing nonfiction is so much easier. just because it's just letting my thoughts flow naturally. And as those thoughts flow naturally, I just kind of dump them out onto the page. And then it's a matter of kind of cleaning it up and editing after that. Whereas writing fiction, like I said, you have to really take into account all of how everything flows together and how one part of the story affects another part of the story. And yeah, it's definitely a lot to pay attention to, but it's more fun. It's fun to immerse yourself into a world and get into that descriptive language and yeah, everything that goes with fiction.
Gosh, you're speaking my language. You really are. So thinking about your new book, The Transcendent, or excuse me, Transcend Your Story, inspired by The Transcendent,
Yeah.
both of which are fairly new still. But thinking about Transcend Your Story, you addressed the question, how do I turn my life experience, my healing journey, into an inspirational novel? You know, I think that a lot of people have some misconceptions around how to write a book or how to write a story. What are a couple of things that are maybe misconceptions that your book addresses?
Oh gosh. Like I said earlier, that's kind of or before this stream, that's kind of a tricky question for me to answer just because I'm trying to remember what if I had any misconceptions leading into to my experience. I know one issue I ran into was the actual publishing process itself. That was
Mhm.
super intimidating. And it's probably part of why, well, there's a few reasons why my book sat on my hard drive from 2017 until 2020 before I finally published it, between finishing writing it and then publishing it. And yeah, publication was definitely a tricky process, and imposter syndrome, which we kind of touched on earlier, was too. But yeah, we already talked about that, but not having any kind of formal training can definitely intimidate you. But then yeah, the publication process itself, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know how that worked. But man, a bit of Google searching and research will go a long way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think another great thing that you mentioned even within your book is learning how to surrender to the process and kind of touch into your intuitive side. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means to you?
Surrendering to the process. So yeah, I ran into that a lot whenever I was trying to fill in those plot holes. Just basically trying to figure out how to tie some parts of the story together and make everything flow. And I'm finding
Mhm.
that right now too, as I'm figuring out filling in plot holes and finishing the plot itself for my sequel. When I just spend some time thinking about like what the problems are, or even writing down what the problems are that I'm trying to solve, and what answers I'm looking for, what kind of answers I'm looking for. There's this art to just letting it go. Just put
Mhm.
it out into the universe and just put it out of your mind. Quit thinking about it for a little bit, and that's basically like that art of surrender to me is basically not really worrying about the outcome anymore and trusting that somehow the outcome will present itself.
Mhm.
And it's amazing how I can just kind of get lost into a daydream. And all of a sudden, the daydream is my characters having a conversation with one another, which will lead to answers to poof. Why don't I include this in the story? That'll solve that.
Absolutely. And that leads me to my next question. And I see we got a question in the chat. I'm gonna come right back to it. But can you tell us a little bit more about how you developed your characters? What were some of the inspirations in terms of figuring out your characters? What did you draw from other mediums in your life experience?
Absolutely. I think it's true for most fiction authors that we draw from ourselves, because who better do we know than ourselves? So, of course, in Leslie, there's a lot of me. She had a lot of my insecurities, a lot of my self esteem issues, and a lot of growth that I personally experienced too in kind of owning myself and coming into myself. And then I incorporated pieces of myself into a lot of my other characters as well. But there were a lot of people that inspired me throughout my life. And I took bits and pieces of those people who were important to me and incorporated them into my characters as well.
And I love the way that you explained it in chapter 2 of Transcend Your Story, where you broke down, how different people in your lives and different parts of your experience just kind of found their way into the characters. Like, tell us a little bit about Mitch, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So he is, I mean, he's definitely my favorite character, hands down, but I have this soft spot for any character that starts out as a bad guy, finds himself and turns himself into a good guy. And that's basically Mitch's story. We start out, he's just kind of the typical jock bully, that I needed to give him kind of a backstory as to why, because my biggest thing is people aren't just inherently, I don't believe people are inherently hateful and cruel without becoming that way based on life experiences. So I needed to give Mitch kind of a backstory that would basically kind of harden him and turn him into a person who's like up against the world.
Mhm.
So I drew from inspiration from somebody in my life who had lost a loved one, and seeing how at a young age and seeing how that experience transformed them into a different kind of person made me realize, like, you know, any kind of a trauma or a challenge or a great loss or anything like that, that especially happens to us at a young age when our reality and our world is still being defined and shaped, can put us in a position where we believe that the world is not safe and the world is dangerous and we have to fight our way through it. So I gave Mitch kind of experience like that in his youth, where the world proved to him that it's not safe. It's a dangerous place, and he has to fight to stay ahead and on top of things. And that basically turned him into a bully, which is
Mm.
basically a lot of his insecurities buried underneath that bully.
And for anyone who's watching live or on the replay, when I say, she handles her characters with so much care, this is a person who understands people. We're not bad inherently. And even if we have some bad people tendencies here or there, bad people tendencies, misbehaviors, she really does a great job of showcasing, it comes from somewhere. And that old saying, hurt people hurt people. So
Yeah.
someone asked in the chat, I believe it was Ted. Yes. So he said, have you transcended your story? I want to tack on to that. In addition to have you transcended your story, what does it mean to transcend your story?
Transcend basically is to rise up from something, to rise above something.
Mhm.
And that's, you know, like using Mitch's story as an example. His story started out as, you know, a great loss in his childhood that kind of shaped his reality into something bleak and dark and dangerous that he had to fight his way through. Transcending that story for him was to realize that's all it is a story. I can rewrite my story. I can become better than this, and I can rewrite the next chapters into something more positive. And
Mhm.
so for me personally, yeah, like I said, the rug got pulled out from under me in 2011 when my son was born. You know, I believed the world was a certain way. I believed the universe worked a certain way, that positive thinking will make all the magic happen. And that's not necessarily true. Positive thinking, I learned throughout the course of my healing journey, is more about trusting that whatever the outcome is for your greatest good. And sometimes the outcome is not what you think you want. So I got what I did not think I wanted. I got what I did not want as my outcome back in 2011 for a dream I had for a positive outcome for my son's birth. And I was so rigid in my expectations that I think that was probably the most traumatizing thing for me, was the fact that I expected things to go just this one certain way and they went the complete opposite. And that's when I say the rug got pulled out from under me. It's like everything I stood on was suddenly gone. And I was like lying
Mhm.
on my back in
Mhm.
confusion and not sure what to trust or believe in the world anymore. And through a lot of counseling and work, and that is honestly, like, backing up a little bit, the counseling started because I was just not in a good place. And I had this baby to raise, and I knew that this child deserved a stable mother, and I was not in a mentally stable place at that time. So I decided to give counseling a try, and that's kind of what led me down that journey of transcending my story. Like, it wasn't the story of how I got the rug pulled out from under me anymore. It was the story of how the universe gave me exactly what I needed for my own personal enlightenment, really. And now I think my own personal philosophies and spirituality is even stronger than it's ever been before. And through this mindset that I've developed because of it, life doesn't stop throwing challenges at you. you're never going to get through life without escaping any challenge at all. Life is going to just be this wonderful fairy tale. It's going to be full of challenges, but with the right mindset, those challenges are not that hard to navigate. And especially if you trust that everything's happening to you for a good reason, it's happening for you, then yeah, it's like you can just embrace everything that comes your way and roll with it.
So perfectly explained. I have so many thoughts on that, but I know we're coming close to time and I have just a couple more questions for you. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, of course, was creating this workshop, which is upcoming. More details to come for anyone who's following. Keep tabs with Jami by following her. Oh, we got another friend, Chris. Hi, Chris. On top of that, you also mentioned in your bio journaling. And of course, the whole purpose of this book is writing and transcending your story through this book. How can writing and creating a story help someone to transcend their story?
I love journaling because that is the one place where I can just be authentic without worrying about judgment. Because I mean, you hope nobody else is reading it. But yeah, whenever I just start pouring my thoughts out and just start writing out whatever's on my mind in my journal, I find myself just starting to ask questions like, why do I think that this happened? Or why did I react this way? Or why do I feel this or think this? And as soon as I write that why question, I feel like answers start coming into my mind, and I just answer the question for myself and just start letting things flow. I don't know if everybody else journals that way, but I find that that's yay. I find that works really well for me, and I get to know myself better. So yeah.
Absolutely, I think. And one of the things that you do really well on in the book, I got early access being the editor, is you ask some of these questions and you prompt your readers to ask these questions as they're thinking about plot, as thinking about their characters and how to start integrating certain things from their real world experience into what may become a story for someone else or just for their own healing growth. With just a few minutes left, 3 major questions. First question of the final 3. If you could have any piece of advice for someone right now who's looking to get started, what's one thing that you would tell them to do or to think about right now?
For somebody who is wanting to basically do what this book is guiding them to do, to transform their own personal life story into a fiction novel, is to just daydream. Actually, that's where it all starts. For me, it all starts with daydreaming. I know. I think I said in my book, like, yay, all those countless hours of zoning off in math class are finally paying off. But that's really where a lot of my magic started happening. And then just any form of creativity after that. I actually wrote fan fiction for fun. That basically just kind of got the wheels turning where the work's already been laid out for me. I don't have to do character development, setting development. I just make stuff up, and that really honed my creative writing style. But other than that, yeah, just daydream, let your conversations with your characters play out in your mind, let scenarios play out in your mind, and then just start writing them down. I never start at the beginning. I start with like the most climactic part of the story and just start, writing it out. And then when another exciting event happens in my mind, I write that out too. And then I just start piecing them all together. So just write, just daydream and then just write.
Oh, I love that. And I can personally identify with that. Coming up on time, but just to add into that for anyone who's watching, like she said, just start writing, get creative, and never feel pressure to start at the beginning. One of the things that I see with both nonfiction authors and fiction authors is, where do I start my story? Listen, in the first draft, you start wherever. You start wherever, because there's always going to be time for edits and revisions. And draft 1 is your playground.
Yes, I love that.
So Jami, thank you so much for your time. The last 2 questions, of course, are where can people find your book, Transcend Your Story, and The Transcendent? We did a kind of a dual interview here. And, where can people follow you and get in touch with you after this broadcast?
Yeah, so my website is www.jamichristine.com. That is JamiChristine. Everything's available there. You can get to know me, get to know my coaching, find out what I offer. My books are available on Amazon, and my social media, which I'm mostly on Facebook and Instagram, is at Jami Christine 11. But I also have a podcast called Transcend. Obviously, I like that word, and I do have a YouTube channel, which I'm gonna put this on the YouTube channel too, this broadcast.
Whew. Well, thank you so much. For anyone who's watching and you can't remember all those names, numbers, and .coms, don't worry. We will have all of that added to the comments and description of this video afterwards. Jami, thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you for sharing so much insight, so much personal story. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of so many different things, but
this is a very fast half hour.
Isn't it? That's how quick it can go. Well, thank you again. Thank you to everyone who's been here. Thank you for watching and tuning in live. If you're on the replay, thank you. Feel free to comment. Let us know what you thought. If you have questions, let us know as well. We are here for you. This has been another live author showcase. I'm Andrae Smith. This is Jami Christine, and thank you guys. Have a fabulous day.